Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling EarthMeta and their token, EMT. You send in their white paper and gotta be honest, it's dense.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
It really is. Thankfully, we have expert speaker here to help us dig through it all. So for someone who just wants, what makes it different, not just another metaverse thing, where do we even start?
Well, I think the big takeaway here is that EarthMeta is really aiming to be a metaverse with a purpose, right? And a huge part of that purpose is tackling this challenge that frankly plagues a lot of metaverse platforms: liquidity.
Okay, liquidity. I feel like that's a big one, but break it down for me.
Sure, imagine you're trying to, I don't know, buy a virtual concert ticket or that piece of digital land you've had your eye on, but the process is just so slow, clunky, frustrating. Why? Because there aren't enough buyers and sellers actively trading. That's the problem with illiquidity.
So it's like being stuck in line at the only coffee shop in the metaverse.
Exactly. And that's where EMT comes in. This token is designed to be the oil that keeps the EarthMeta economy moving, so to speak.
So EMT is more than just a token. It's the lifeblood of this whole metaverse experience they're building.
That's the idea. They're really pushing for EMT to be the primary currency for everything within EarthMeta.
Yeah.
Transactions, governance, you name it.
Interesting. So how does that actually work? Like, does owning EMT give you any real power within this metaverse?
Absolutely. They've got a couple of intriguing mechanisms in place. First, there's staking. You're essentially locking up your EMT to help validate transactions and secure the network. Kind of similar to how miners operate in proof-of-work blockchains.
And I'm guessing in return for providing that service, you get rewarded, kind of like earning interest on your crypto.
Precisely. It incentivizes users to hold EMT for the long term, which can contribute to price stability, right? But here's where it gets really interesting. They have this concept of governors.
Governors.
Yeah.
Okay, now you got to tell me more about this. Are we talking tiny little gavels in virtual town hall meetings?
Well, not quite, but close. When you purchase a city within EarthMeta, and think of it like minting a limited edition digital asset, but instead of like a piece of art, you're minting an entire city.
Wow, so not just a virtual home, but an entire city.
Exactly.
What does being a governor even entail?
It comes with perks. Governors get discounts on minting new cities. And here's the exciting part. They have a say in shaping the rules and development of their digital domain.
So it's like being the mayor of your own mini metaverse. You get to influence the direction of your city's economy, how it evolves.
Exactly. And this ties back to their whole vision of a community-driven metaverse, right? They even have something called a farming system, which further empowers users to participate in the economy of individual cities.
Okay, now you've got me hooked. Farming system. This is getting good. Tell me more about how this whole thing works.
Well, each city has its own liquidity pool, right? By staking their EMT, users contribute to that pool and can earn rewards based on the transactions happening within that city.
So it's like owning a piece of the local economy in your city. Your city thrives. You reap the benefits.
You got it. They're creating a system where everyone is incentivized to contribute to the overall success of the EarthMeta platform, which is, I think, a fascinating approach. I haven't really seen this in other metaverse projects.
Yeah, it sounds like they're really trying to address some of the common pitfalls that other metaverse platforms have encountered. This concept of shared ownership and governance is intriguing. But before we, dive deeper into that, I'm curious, this whole farming system thing has me thinking, is this like what true digital ownership looks like? Having a real stake in the metaverse, not just like owning a virtual pet or a cool hat or something.
It's definitely a step in that direction, and it ties into their approach to governance, which is another area where I think EarthMeta is really trying to set itself apart.
Right. They mentioned something about a DAO.
Yeah.
Right? Decentralized Autonomous Organization.
You got it. And EMT is at the heart of it. So by holding the token, users gain voting rights within the EarthMeta DAO.
So it's like having a seat at the table, right? Where the decisions are made about the platform. Instead of just being told what's happening, you get to actually influence the direction.
Exactly. They're striving for true community governance, less about top-down control and more about shared ownership and decision-making, which, if they can pull it off, could be a game changer.
It's like the difference between renting an apartment and owning a house.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're more invested in the well-being of something when you have, like, a genuine stake in it.
That's a great analogy. And this concept of shared ownership extends beyond just governance, right? It's woven into the fabric of their farming system, their approach to liquidity. It's a recurring theme throughout this whole white paper.
Yeah, it's clear they're putting a lot of emphasis on building that strong foundation. But What about the future? What does their roadmap look like? Any hints about where they're headed next?
They've actually been pretty transparent about their roadmap, which is refreshing to see these days. They've outlined some key milestones like expanding the utility of EMT, integrating with virtual reality platforms, and even exploring partnerships with real-world brands.
Okay, now that's exciting. Integrating with VR could be huge. Imagine like earning EMT just by attending a virtual concert or, I don't know, exploring a museum in the metaverse.
Precisely. And those partnerships with real-world brands could open up some really interesting possibilities, right? Imagine using your EMT to buy like virtual goods from your favorite clothing store, or even booking a stay at a virtual hotel that's modeled after, a real-world luxury resort.
Okay, now I'm really starting to see the potential here. But, let's talk about the elephant in the room for a second. The risks. Because let's be honest, the metaverse is still uncharted territory in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you're absolutely right to raise that point. And to their credit, EarthMeta does acknowledge the importance of security and transparency. They've outlined plans for independent audits of their smart contracts, which is absolutely crucial in the world of DeFi.
Smart contracts, DeFi. For our listeners who might be new to all this, can you give us a quick breakdown of what those are?
Of course. So think of a smart contract like a self-executing agreement, but it's written in code. So it automatically enforces the terms of a transaction, eliminating the need for a middleman. And DeFi, or decentralized finance, essentially aims to rebuild traditional financial systems, but using blockchain technology.
So instead of relying on banks or these big institutions, it's all powered by the blockchain and these smart contracts.
Exactly. And while this decentralized approach offers a lot of advantages, it also comes with inherent risks. That's why those independent audits are so important. They help ensure that these smart contracts are secure and they're functioning as intended.
It's like having a building inspector come in before you move into a new house.
Right.
You want to make sure everything is up to code.
Precisely. And EarthMeta seems to understand the importance of building that trust and credibility within their community.
So they're ticking the boxes when it comes to security, transparency. But the metaverse is more than just, code and smart contracts, right? It's about building a community, a shared experience. What are they doing on that front?
Well, they're actually quite active. They're hosting these virtual events, AMAs, with the development team. They even have a dedicated community forum where users can connect, share ideas, provide feedback.
Okay, so they're not just building a platform, they're actually cultivating a community around it.
Exactly. They seem to understand that the success of EarthMeta depends on more than just the technology itself. It depends on the people who choose to inhabit this metaverse.
Community is key, right? It's like the difference between a ghost town and this bustling city. So they've got a solid plan, a dedicated community, and a vision for this more equitable and community-driven metaverse. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I have to ask, from what we've seen, EarthMeta seems to be, checking all the right boxes. But I'm always a little, skeptical when it comes to the financial side of things. So let's talk, tokenomics for a minute. Expert speaker, what can you tell us about the EMT token itself?
Well, the good news is they've been very upfront about providing those details, right? The white paper lays out the tokenomics quite clearly. And there are some promising signs. For example, they've capped the total supply of EMT at 2.1 billion tokens.
Okay, so it's a fixed supply, and they can't just create more EMT out of thin air, down the line.
Exactly, and that's a big deal because it means the value of your EMT isn't going to be subject to sudden inflation from the project just minting more tokens whenever they need funding. It's a finite resource, which can be a good thing for long-term value.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how do they plan to distribute these tokens? Who gets them and how?
They've allocated portions to different areas, that are crucial for growth, development, marketing, partnerships. And I think this signals that they're serious about investing in the platform's future.
So they're putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak. What about us? Any chance of, getting in on the action ourselves? Snapping some EMT?
Well, they did have a pre-sale, but for those who missed it, don't worry. They're planning to list EMT on both centralized and decentralized exchanges, so...
Okay, so options.
Exactly. So you'll have options whether you prefer, the convenience of a centralized platform or the added security and control of a decentralized one.
Options are always good. But let's maybe zoom out for a sec. We've covered a lot of ground here. Liquidity, governance, the roadmap, even tokenomics. What's the key takeaway for our listener? If they're just tuning in, what's the one thing you want them to remember about EarthMeta?
I think the biggest thing to remember is that EarthMeta is ambitious. They're not just trying to build another metaverse, right? They're trying to build a metaverse with a purpose. One that empowers its users, is built on these principles of transparency, community ownership. Whether they can achieve that vision, that remains to be seen. But they're certainly taking some innovative steps in the right direction.
A metaverse with a purpose.
I love that.
It's not just about, like, escaping reality, right? It's about building a better one, at least in the digital realm.
Exactly.
And while it's easy to get caught up in the hype of, like, any new technology, it's important to remember that the metaverse is still, it's still a baby, it's early days, there are risks involved.
Absolutely.
It's like investing in, I don't know, the early days of the internet. Massive potential, but also a lot of uncertainty. So any final words of wisdom for our listeners before they, dive headfirst into the metaverse?
Yeah, I would just say, do your own research. Don't just take our word for it, or anyone else's for that matter. Read the white paper, explore the EarthMeta platform for yourself, join their community, and, most importantly, make an informed decision based on your own assessment.
Couldn't agree more. Informed decisions are the best kind of decisions, especially when it comes to, this exciting, ever-evolving world of the metaverse. This has been a really incredible deep dive into EarthMeta, and I, for one, am even more curious to see how this all unfolds. A huge thank you to you, expert speaker, for guiding us through this fascinating project.
It's been my pleasure. Always fun to explore these groundbreaking concepts with you.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of EarthMeta. We hope you found it insightful, maybe even a little inspiring. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep diving deep.